everybody. Welcome back to the one, the only knee slapping K-pop podcast. It is your girl Maria, and I am here with Kayla.
Hello, hello.
And Sammi.
Hello, hello, hello.
Love it. And we are here to once again talk about Asian books, but with a twist. From authors who originally are not from America or grew up not a significant amount from America. And I think these books were also originally written in another language originally too.
The big thing with this is all of them were translated into English.
Yes.
From an Asian author from a language that was not English.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. So this is the second part of our, I guess at least Kayla and Sammy's apology tour.
Our apology tour for the terrible books we read last year, and also Jessica's terrible books from the year before. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot
apology. Look, we don't do apologies often, but for literature.
Yep.
Apparently we do.
And it's like I don't read books. I don't read outside of this podcast. Like I do not read for fun. Like most of the books I've read the past years, I've read for this podcast.
The most I read is I like reading like horror novels, but like for the most part I don't read either.
Well, this episode we do have like a running theme between all of our books. Is like we got like a very like psychological thriller horror-esque vibe going on with all of the books we have. Yes. Which I think is a genre all of us enjoy anyway. That's also very fun.
I also think that these are also shorter novels than our
much shorter.
Mine is way shorter.
A lot shorter.
Mine is shorter because let me check the page count on my other one.
I think mine's though is about the same, roughly. Mine
is less than half the length.
So my other book was 454 pages. This one is 336, like 100 pages shorter.
Yeah.
Also, my other book was like a young adult fantasy, so it wasn't a very hard 450 pages to read. So
yeah, mine was 545. This is 234.
Mm-hmm.
I got a lot.
Much better.
The other one had very small text.
Oh
this
yeah.
one is a reasonable,
just like a reasonable size text.
Yes. And also,
okay, actually, this book is actually a little bit shorter because this one is because the book I read previously was like. I think it's like 408, and then the other book's like 300, if I can get there quickly. 323, 4 technically, yeah.
So we all have shorter books this time.
And also, Maria, you also read like the lightest of all of our novels for the last video.
I mean, well, Still 400 pages,
still
but
400
like
pages, but in terms
contemporary.
of like,
it's a
contemporary as a thing of like, which is always a little. Most contemporaries are shorter than fantasy novels.
I mean, the fact that it was 400 something, I'm so
that also sounds very long for that book.
Yeah, for a contemporary novel, that's a bigger contemporary novel. Not gonna lie, but anyways.
So, shall we go through our spoiler-free section?
Spoiler-free section. Do you want to go in reverse order this time, just for funsies?
Sure. So
Sammy's
I read
first, then.
Confessions by Kanae Minato. Honestly speaking, spoiler-free, because this book is like, it's only 6 chapters, and each chapter is told from a different perspective, and it is one of my favorite books I think I've ever read. I love this book. I thought this book was twist on twist on twist on twist. So essentially, it centers around, each chapter is about a different person, from the perspective of a different person. But to be honest, essentially, it is a story about a school teacher who gets revenge on the people who killed her daughter. So her little 4-year-old daughter had an accident on the grounds of the school. This was caused by somebody. I won't reveal who it is. And I'm not going to get into spoilers, because I do think that even the first chapter of this book could be a, like, short story. And would be perfect, like, leaves you with, isn't a complete story, but, like, leaves you with elements, leaves you with thoughts. And it would be perfect as, like, a little short story. So I don't even want to spoil the first chapter. But that is essentially the plot of this book, and it is great. And I loved it. That's like, honestly, I don't want to reveal anything. The first chapter, which is the only one I'm going to talk about, because it goes wild after that. Absolutely insane. Is told in essentially a lecture format. Like, the rest of the book goes into a normal literary format of, like, with, like, you know, text and, like, perspectives, and, like, you get people's thoughts and everything else, and you get quotes and everything. The entire first chapter is this, teacher's monologue about what happened to her, about her life, what happened to her daughter, everything else. There is no breaks. You do not get any internal monologue. You don't get anything. It is just a lecture she is giving to this group of students. And it is wild. But that is all I will say for now. I highly recommend it. Everybody should read it. It's only, like, it is a short read. You can get through it in, like, a day. So, Maria, your turn?
Yeah, I guess I'm going second again.
Well, that's what happens when there's three of us and we decide to go in reverse.
No. I mean, I'm thinking about if we're doing it in reverse, I'm just like, all right, I guess I'm the palindrome then,
you're still going second. Oh, well.
I'm still going second. Yeah. All right, so my book is called, translated title, of course, is The Elephant, I'm sorry, oh my god, why am I saying elephant? Jesus Christ. The Graveyard Apartment, a novel, aka The Graveyard Apartment. This book is by Mariko, was it Koike? I think it's Koike Mariko technically, but like if you say it in Japanese, but Mariko Koike. I think it's Japanese. I'm sensing a pattern here. Japanese horror thriller. Yeah. Basically, the premise of this is this book was actually originally published in 1986, but the story of it takes place in 1987 over the span of like several months. About roughly half a year, I'm gonna say. It's basically about a young family. They move into what they believe to be a really great place to live. Oh, nice, even though it's right next to an old ancient graveyard, because I guess this was a graveyard where, for a time period back in, I think, the Taisho era, they didn't cremate bodies, they buried them. So I guess that makes this graveyard, even though it looks nice in the landscape and stuff, it's next to a graveyard. And they start to realize that some weird things are starting to happen at this place. And it's, you know, even though it's very idyllic and nice, there still isn't a ton of people that live here in this apartment. You know, it's still kind of abandoned and weird. And they're noticing a lot more sinister, evil things happening. And yeah, of course, if I go through the whole plot, it'd be spoiling the plot. Because it's basically a timeline of just really messed up shit after messed up shit happening that's creepy and whatnot, you know, all that jazz. So yeah, I thought it was pretty suspenseful. In a way, it didn't end like how I was expecting it to end, but like also I kind of get how it was made to end, if it makes sense. So not really surprising, but there's actually a lot more interpersonal stuff as well going on in the story that I think is a little bit more surprising to me. It definitely puts you in the mindset of the 80s and stuff like that. And yeah, it definitely builds up suspense over time. It's like you could definitely go through this book and be like, okay, red flag, this building is weird, this area is weird, you know. But yeah, pretty solid story. And yeah, I find it interesting too that the choice of the chapters of this book were made to be like specific day, you know, month, day, and then year was the name of each chapter basically, and sometimes it would say specifically morning or afternoon or stuff like that, you know. It's very much horror. Detective fiction, the way it's described on Amazon says detective fiction, and I guess without going into too much, I'd be like, I guess, but like detective fiction without the detectives, I guess, if that makes, like, whoever's doing the investigating, they ain't like policemen or anything like that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but you don't have to be a policeman in a detective fiction.
Yeah.
You just have to be investigating something.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, pretty much. But like, I feel like when people say
anybody can be a detective.
Anyone can be, but I think some people probably think it's like, oh, it's an actual policewoman. It's like, no, not really, but there is investigating going on.
No, it's whoever wants to investigate can investigate. Yeah. We don't
But yeah, detective fiction and horror writing, I'd say, is pretty accurate for this book. But yeah, it's a solid book. I don't usually read horror books like this, so yeah, I'd say it was actually a pretty easy read through, honestly. I'm stuck with easy read throughs, I guess, but like, yeah, it was build up suspense, You know, it ended in a way I wasn't necessarily expecting, but, like, it makes sense for this story why it would end that way. And then, yeah, I'd recommend it. It's shorter than the previous book I talked about, and, yeah, it's one of those stories that's just kind of like, yeah, pretty solid. So, Kayla.
So, I read the book 7 Years of Darkness by Yu Jeong Jeong. She is a Korean author. From all of the reviews I've read of this book, she seems to be one of the, like, top writers of, like, psychological thrillers in South Korea, which is really cool, and that's what initially drew me to this book to begin with. This is essentially like a murder thriller type thing. Like, I could very easily see this as, like, a crime thriller, suspense K-drama type situation. Essentially what happens is that there is a young girl who is found dead, essentially in the reservoir, like a dam reservoir in a South Korean remote village. And then it goes through the story of mostly these 3 men who are all kind of involved in it in various ways and situations. And it kind of goes through all 3 of their lives and what they're doing and how they relate to what happened. And it also deals with this kid named Sowon. Sowon is the son of the man who eventually ends up being convicted of the murder of this girl and is in prison. And it also follows him 7 years after this murder takes place, as he is also sort of uncovering what was going on with his dad and the people around him in that night, and sort of how that entire tragedy sort of continues to follow him, like, all of these years after that it happened, and his dad has already been convicted and in prison and stuff like that. I will say that a lot of it is told in, like, a, it's not a flashback, because what happens is that his son finds this, like, manuscript of a novel that's being written by one of these 3 men who have been involved in everything, and he's sort of been writing this tale, trying to also unfold from himself everything that happened, in that day and week that followed. So it's mostly the son who is reading about these events that happened in the past, and then occasionally we get stuff of him of what's happening in the present and how this entire situation is still affecting him in his life and everything, but it's mostly him reading this manuscript that this other man has written about the events that took place 7 years ago. It's very good, very easy to follow as well. It's not very it's not trying to trick you at any point in time. It kind of sets up these characters and is telling you, like, exactly the events that happened. It's a thriller in the way that it's, like, very suspenseful and there was a murder, but it's not a thriller in the way that there's, like, a big plot twist coming. You can kind of piece together logically what was gonna happen at that point to begin with, but it's more so of the way that the whole story unfolds that I would say makes it a thriller. Very good. I enjoyed it a lot.
Alright, so spoilers?
Spoiler time.
Spoiler time!
Okay.
I think that's, like, the big thing with these books is because they're all, like, mystery thrillers that it's like
you can't really
there's not much to say about it
so
other
I would
without
recommend
the spoilers.
going to read all of these before you listen to this section, because
Yes.
we're about to spoil the shit out of
Spoil the plot of the entire
Well, we're
books.
we're gonna be spoiling each other's books now, so
That's fair, but we
You
knew
know what?
this
It's
going
fine.
into this.
We knew this was gonna happen.
We knew this was gonna happen.
yeah.
Alright, so confessions. So this book begins with a great chapter. So essentially, this teacher, it's the last day of school, and she is just talking to her group of, like, middle school students. I think they're in middle school. They're gonna stay in middle school. So it's not even like it's their last year of middle school. They're just, like, I think they're in, like, 6th, 7th grade. So she essentially talks about how she's retiring and she's not moving to another school. She's just full on retiring from being a teacher after her daughter died. Her daughter, she's a single mother, and her daughter, the police, have concluded, fell into the pool at school, and she's about 4, so she was just there because her mom was working late, and she would sometimes just stay in the classroom and she was fine. And so the kid fell into the pool and apparently drowned. And then the teacher goes into this whole, like, it's a very long monologue talking about how she's a teacher and the whole thing about being a teacher for your students and how some students are very ungrateful, and, like, it's not in a mean way. She's just talking about the realities of being a teacher in society and how students expect so much of you, but, like, are little shits back. And that's a fact. kids are shits.
It's even worse today, from what I've heard.
They're little
recent
shits.
Years. From what I've heard in recent years, I've heard it's even worse.
So essentially, she talks about how her daughter did not drown. Her daughter was murdered by, in this first chapter, she refers to them as Student A and Student B. And so she talks about Student A and Student B and how Student A is a psychopathic little shit who made a shocking coin purse. And at some point threatened her with it. Because she always thought of him as, like, a very unnerving child. Because he was a very unnerving child. And she threatened him because it was, like, a little shock purse. And, so, apparently her and those two boys, she doesn't even refer to them as boys, she refers to them as students, but I'm just gonna say they're boys. Of course they're boys. They lured her daughter out to the pool, and then gave her this little coin purse, and it shocked her, and apparently it quote-unquote shocked her unconscious, and then the boy A just left and was like, haha, and boy B, to cover it up, because he's like, oh shit, we killed a girl, and he got scared because apparently he wasn't as familiar with the whole situation, threw the kid in the pool. And so, essentially, she doesn't trust that the law would actually do anything to these kids. Because, like, why would it? Like, nothing happened. The police concluded that it was an accident. Nothing's gonna happen. So, she, at some point, she also talks about why she's a single parent. So the guy that she was with, they were very much in love. They were very much like a very happy couple, and then they had this daughter. But the guy had a bit of a past, and I believe it was more drug related, and he has HIV. He is HIV positive. And so she gets back in contact with the father, takes his blood, and puts it in the two boys' cartons of milk, thus infecting them with HIV. And that is the end of the first chapter. It's these kids.
It's not even how that works, though.
It's not, and she knows that, but they don't. They're middle school kids.
True. I guess they wouldn't know that.
They wouldn't know that. They're all fucking because the minute she says in the book, the minute she talks about HIV, the kids seemingly recoil. They lean back in their chairs away from her because this book was written 2008.
Okay.
Like, this is, like, it's not like it's the 80s, but it's a different time, man. People had different opinions.
I'm curious, too, about how they educate people on HIV.
Who's to say, but these kids
or even if
scared.
It was as bad there
and
as
so,
it was in the
at that
States
point, yeah, that's what happens, and that's the first chapter, and it's a very suspenseful chapter. It's very good. So then, the second chapter is actually told from the perspective of the class president. So, you then move on to a different chapter. So, at this point, we're at the next year of school. They get a new teacher. And so we find out that boy A is called Shuya, and boy B is called, Naoki. I'm gonna go with that. That's the pronunciations I'm going with. She writes a letter to the teacher, and she's telling her about all the things that have happened, about all the shit that she caused, about how the insanity that's happened post her leaving the school, and how Naoki just does not come to school. He's enrolled, but he is just not showing up. He's basically
like a young Hikikomori, basically.
Yes, he is just not coming. He's just not getting involved. And Shuya is acting like nothing ever happened. And he is mostly being ignored. None of the kids want anything to do with him. None of the kids are talking to him. And to be honest, he was kind of a loner beforehand. But for the most part, no one is doing it. Like, they're not bullying him, but they're not...
They're basically choosing to publicly avoid him.
They're choosing not to converse with him, essentially. And the new teacher who they're getting is essentially making this school president go with him every week to try to get Naoki back to school, to give them his lessons, but also try to talk to the parent, and they never see him. He does not want to participate. He does not want to do anything. And then he finds out, he also believes that because no one's getting involved with Shuya, that he's also getting bullied. But then that actually turns into real bullying because these kids are like, you killed a little girl. And also you're infected with AIDS. Because they fully think that. So essentially, it's also revealed that she tested, that the school president girl she tests, like, the milk and realized that there was no blood in it to begin with. Like, there wasn't blood in it. Like, these kids are not infected with AIDS, and also that's not how AIDS works. But Shuya then uses it as, like, revenge on these kids, because so it's, like, he wants the bullying to end, so he just uses his supposed illness as a weapon, because that also then makes the kids scared of him. So it's just, like, these kids are, like, turning into chaos. Also, at some point, those two, Shuya and this girl, get into a relationship. I don't know if she fully remembers that he's a murderer, but, like, we're just gonna... These kids are in middle school. They're bad ideas. So, the next chapter is from the point of view of Naoki's mother. That one comes from the perspective of his sister, who finds her mother's diary after she dies. This is the same period. So we find out that the mom is really worried about her kid. He's obsessed with being clean. He does not leave his room, but just wants... he becomes super reclusive, but, like, doesn't clean himself, but very much is very thing about cleaning plates, about cleaning, like, everything that he touches. But he is completely disheveled. He refuses to leave his room. He will not shower. Nothing. So he is reclusive. She also blames the teacher, because at some point the teacher does come to confront the parents, and the teacher and the mom is just like, no, he didn't do it, but also if he did do it, it's your fault for being a bad single mom. Lord. So she is just trying to do she's going for all of the... She's also descending into madness, because she's also talking about how, well, people are gonna judge her because her kid's not going to school, but the school, like, this woman is trying to justify everything
it's giving
in her
Japanese,
mind, but also her kid it's giving
society judgment.
But you can also really tell this woman is losing her mind in this whole situation, because this is months and months and months of her kid not really wanting to be a part of anything, not engaging with anything, her having to be in a house with him because she's a stay-at-home mother. And it starts with the fact that, like, the beginning is sort of from the point of view of the sister, because you also learn that Naoki killed his mom in the beginning of the chapter, and by the end of the chapter you find out what happened. So at some point, she also is trying to, like, help her kid, so she's trying to, like, because his hair has grown out, he's completely disheveled, she sees maybe if I cut his hair, he'll be more open to, like, maybe he'll take a shower. Turns out he then just shaves his head and, like, bathes, but shaves his head fully off. And then he does actually leave his house, but he leaves his house to go to a convenience store and smears his blood on everything. Just cuts his hand and just puts blood on all the items in a bunch of items in the store, because he is, like, also losing his mind. So, at the end of that chapter, you find out that she has decided that she is going to just murder-suicide this. It's like, well, we're done. I think it's for the best if it's over, because I have to kill this kid. And also, you know what? If I'm gonna kill this kid, I'm just gonna go out too. Jeez. That's the end of that chapter. She's decided to kill her own son and herself. Because, why not?
That's a descent to madness, not gonna lie.
So then, the fourth chapter is from Naoki's point of view. So you get, like, the whole story, like, this chapter is from his point of view, and then the next chapter is from Shui's point of view, so you get, like, the murder, like, you get this murder, like, 3 times, from 3 different point of views. So you get, Naoki talks about how he was approached by, Shuya, they started talking, this kid always thought of himself as, like, very much victimized, even though he wasn't, because he's not that good a tennis player, but, like, he's victimized by that. His teachers don't, like, he's not that good a student, but it's not his problem. It's all of the other things. The thing was, Shuya made the coin purse, and essentially, Naoki is the one that picked the child, because there was a thing in the school where, like, if the kids get in trouble, and I think this is a thing in Japan where they call the homeroom teacher to come bail these kids out. It's not like jail, but, like, kid was out past curfew. They asked the teacher to come in and talk some sense into this kid. Her and another teacher had this rule where, like, if it's a male student, he'll go do it. If it's a male student from her class, he'll go deal with it. If it's a female student from his class, she'll go deal with it. But Naoki was super pissed. It's like, why doesn't she even care about me at all? And she sent this other teacher who I don't know. And it's like, because you're a male student, she doesn't want to get involved. And also, you're a fucking creep. So that's why he picked to trick her daughter. I don't think he was fully aware of what was going on. But he was like, well, I want to punish this kid because it'll hurt her. So they trick that. She collapses. Shuya told him that, like, well, the kid's dead. Go tell everybody, because Shuya was like, I don't care. And then Naoki got super pissed because Shuya called him a thing that he is hated to be called, which is a failure, which caused him to throw the kid into the pool. The thing was that coin purse didn't shock her and kill her. It just shocked her and she fainted. She was alive when she entered that pool, and she was 4, so she did drown. But turns out it's actually Naoki that killed the kid. The coin purse just, get the kid unconscious.
So Naoki
is actually the one that killed her. Yeah.
But Naoki didn't know that she wasn't dead, is what I'm getting.
Oh, no. He knew. He figured out that girl was, like, twitching to wake up, and he just wanted to do something that Shuya couldn't.
Oh, Lord.
Because he got called the failure right before. So he's like, well, I'm going to do something he couldn't do, and I'm actually going to kill this kid. And then he did. And so then
the logic of fucked up children.
Fears death because he's also gets scared of, like, I'm going to infect my family with HIV. Oh, no. And so he also, like, you also get his perspective of, like, him not bathing, not showering, just living in his own filth. And that when his mom cut his hair, in a weird way, he talks about him being so filthy as, like, proof that he is alive and that he's, like, the world is affecting him. I don't know. It's a descent into every person in this book descends into just, various like, forms of madness.
Having a mental breakdown.
Oh, absolutely. And so when his mom cuts his hair, he's like, well, that's getting rid of his evidence of, like, that he's alive and that the world's affecting him. So he goes to the store and actually is just trying to, like, get arrested. Because he's like, I need to be somewhere else. I'm in a bad place. So then his mom attempts to kill him. But then she also mentions that, like, I failed you. Which causes him to stab her. In, like, this like, he blacks out in a fit of rage. We learn he stabs her. And now he's going to jail. Because he killed his mom.
Well, duh. Yeah, he should be.
Yeah, but he also, like, blacked out in a fit of rage and killed his mom.
Yeah.
That's sort of how that works.
Like, fail is a trigger word for him.
Fail is a big trigger word for him. So
clearly it's a big trigger word.
So the 5th chapter is from Shuya's point of view. And it's almost presented like a weird little last will and so the first line is the last will and testament. But he's an 8th grader and he's a fucking sociopath. So we present Shuya's life, which is that his mom abandoned him, like, was abusive, but then his father divorced his mom then just left, and so he wants to get his mom's attention because his mom worked as a scientist, so that's why he's making all these, like, weird little contraptions. He then proceeds to want to just gain any sort of attention. And sort of the story of him, like, winning the national, like, science fair gets overshadowed by a case of a child murdering her family. Like, that's the actual big news story of the time. So he's like, well, I guess I gotta commit some horrible acts for attention. So then he decides to kill this kid. Turns out that he actually kind of was okay with getting HIV and was a little disappointed that he didn't. Because he's the one that actually decides to test himself and realize he's testing negative. And unlike Naoki, who's out here being like, well, I got AIDS now. Like, that's not how AIDS works, kids. So we find out that at some point, him and the girl, the school president girl, are in a relationship. And then at some point they have a fight. And then he kills her. His first murder, technically. And so then he goes out to find his mother to try to reconnect with his mom, this was apparently why we did all this, was for his mother. Finds out that she has remarried and has a child. Is just living happily with this new family that she has.
Ouch.
Yep. So he decides that, you know what I'm just gonna do? we're doing the second murder-suicide of this book. So I'm gonna tell you, the blurb on the front of this book is, if Albert Camus had written Heathers, it would have looked like this. And the Heathers comparison, I did not realize how timely that was, because his plan here is to set a bomb in the school. He's in the school, and for it to detonate.
Oh, yeah, that's Heathers,
and
for
it to detonate while at a school assembly. So he tries to detonate it, and then he gets a call from the original teacher whose kid he murdered. And the last chapter is back from her point of view. So she reveals that she never put the blood in. She did put the blood in the milk, but the child's father found, like, because you can't sneakily steal someone's blood. That's not a thing. Mm-hmm. You feel things. Mm-hmm. So he came to school and, like, put it back, and he's like, no, you can't do this. So they never ingested blood whatsoever. She did try. She did want it to happen, but it never happened. And so, essentially, she had been orchestrating this whole thing. She is the one that had been talking with the new teacher, her replacement, about, and giving him different ideas for the lesson, like giving him notes and everything. And her advice was all in order to make things worse for both Shuya and Yoki. She's the one that told him to keep going to his house, to, like, drive home the points of him, of the school. She's the one that encouraged him to talk about the bullying, which caused the bullying to get worse for Shuya. Her final revenge was that she did hear about the bomb. The bomb is at his mom's workplace. When he detonated that bomb, he killed his mom, and at the end she's like, well, my revenge is complete. To be honest, that last chapter begins...
So wait, did he think that the bomb...
He thought the bomb was... He planted the bomb in the school he was in to kill everybody in the school he was in. She moved the bomb to where his mother works.
Wow.
To the university where his mom works. And thus, that is who he blew up. One of my favorite points is that the last chapter, when she calls him, it says, Shuya, it's mama. That's what she greets him with, because she knows she's about to fuck him up. The police will arrive, she's talking about how the police are gonna come. They're gonna arrest you for, like, the death of not only your little, the truth of the death, then the punishment you're gonna receive is not sufficient. And so she's like, I needed you to hurt I needed you to hurt like I did. And so the last line is funny. I think I finally had my fill of revenge now, and with any luck, I've at least started you on your road to recovery. But I don't know how he recovers, but she at least thinks that now people are gonna know the truth about what happened to her daughter, and so he is gonna get arrested. That's this book, and I thought it was really good.
That sounds like a good book, honestly.
It's just twist after twist after twist. Like, you don't expect bomb a murder-suicide. Also,
wouldn't she be complicit, though, in murder? Or no?
I mean, she's lost everything. Her husband that she was in love with has, by the end of this book, actually died of AIDS. So she's lost everything. So, I don't think she cares.
Yeah, so she
lost her daughter, she lost her husband, she lost everything she ever had. All because of two little shits.
Two little shitty middle schoolers.
Two little shits. Mm-hmm. With mommy issues. Both of them got mommy issues. One was both of them killed their moms by the end of the book.
Yeah, they did.
So that was Confessions.
And they took out their feelings on a mom.
They took out their feelings on a 6-year-old. Yeah. On a 4-year-old. Sorry, not a 6-year-old. The 4-year-old.
Yeah, they took out their feelings on a 6-year-old.
4-year-old.
Because of their mom, who was their teacher. And they had mommy issues.
They all got mommy issues. That poor kid, too. That kid drowned. So that is Confession. Highly recommend. Even if you know the twist, it's like a wild ride. You, like, forget about them. Because a lot of the twists are revealed in, like, the first page. Because, like, you'd figure out that, like, Naoki's mom is dead in, like, the first page of her chapter. Uh-huh. But, like, you have to figure out, like, what the fuck happened. What happened here? So everyone's just... so many families destroyed.
I feel like that's going to be the theme of this episode. It's a lot of families getting destroyed.
Absolutely destroyed. So many child deaths. That's another thing in a lot of these books. Because my book
child also has a child death.
A lot of child death.
All right. Graveyard Apartment. So basically, it all starts off with this family. Got the dad, Tepe. We got the mom, Misao. And then we got their daughter, Tamo. And of course, we started the book opening up with the family finding out that the family bird, Pyoko, is dead. And they tell the daughter, Tamo, this, you know. And they're all just, you know, they just recently moved to this place too. And all of a sudden it's been a few days in and then the bird dies and, you know. And then of course from there it goes into describing the local area, how there's this brand new apartment here. It's right next to a graveyard from the Taisho era. That's left over from a Buddhist temple, and there's a crematorium in the background in the distance. All that fun jazz. And the apartment is pretty much surrounded by this graveyard for the most part. Also, interesting tidbit we find out. So Tepe had a first wife, and then he cheated on that first wife with Misao. And then that first wife, finding out that about her husband's affair, killed herself and basically left a suicide note, basically let him know. And we find out about this wife because there's a memorial plate for her in the home that Misao looks at. Again, after, you know, doing unpacking and all that jazz. And then it goes into the story about Misao and Tepe. They met at work and then, obviously fell for each other. And then Misao, because of the whole fact that the first wife died, she left that office place because she felt very ashamed about that. And they also in person talk about the first death of the first wife. And basically, you know, Misao ultimately decides to stay with Tepe. And then of course they bring the first wife's memorial tablet with them and stuff like that. Tamao, their daughter, is kindergarten age. She enrolls into a local school. They go to get the uniform, and of course, like, there's a shop on there, you know, the local area. There's a little bit. The apartment itself is bigger than what they were used to, but it's not. The location might not be necessarily the most desired place. A little bit of shabby shop, and the shopkeeper mentions to Misao about the death of a child last year that was hit by a car in front of the temple. And that's the reason why the kid, like, Tama was wearing, like, a yellow hat now, so that they could try to see them. And also, and interesting enough, after they leave the shop, Tama decides to tell mom that, Pyoko, the bird that just died, you know, the day or two before, was just visiting her the night before, and that it was talking to her. That the bird was talking about the apartment, and the area being dangerous, about there being monsters, and that when the monsters speak, that a big wind sucks everyone into a black hole and that sort of stuff. And of course, Misao, of course, thinks that this is very much just a dream and a nightmare, but now the way Tamo's phrasing it, Tamo sounds like it's real, that the bird just showed up and is here talking to her, pretty much. And of course, you know, they go and they meet another interesting thing to know is that the neighbors, there isn't a lot of them. It's a very big, it's like 8-floor apartment building, but yet there's only like about maybe 6 units in use in this big apartment building, so kind of quiet. Very weird. I'm not meaning the neighbors, one of the neighbors, Eiko, and who has a daughter, Kaori, and a son, Sutomu, I think. Kaori and Sutomu. You know, they bond with Tamao. They're bond. She and Eiko and Misao bond. It's probably the most closest adult friendship that I see from there. And they have an interesting situation where they mentioned about the storage setup and check out the basement of the apartment. And the interesting thing note about this basement is a couple things. That there are no stairways from this basement. There's only the elevator. No stairs to get out of that basement. Except for the elevator. Okay. And then also the storage lockers themselves kind of resemble a little bit like coffins. It's giving coffin. Not complete coffin, obvious, but it's giving coffin. Yeah, so apparently there's also another random company in the building that is keeping their unsold product in the basement. And that also Misao noticed that she felt a wind chill, but yet the basement was all sealed up. Why are we feeling the wind in the basement? And then also and as an odd note, Misao also finds an odd bird feather on the bird cage that used to be Pyoko's, but Pyoko died, of course. White but gray at the tip, which was a little bit different from the family bird, but still a little weird. And then Teppei meets his brother Tatsuji for drinks, and then Tatsuji got a wife named Naomi. Is apparently controlling a bitch, but they still meet up at the club, I guess. And of course, we find out, throughout the course of this book and the story, we find out more about some inner thoughts about some of the characters. Teppei's one of them, where he does think about, is introspective about the death of his first wife and really the lack of emotions to that death he has and him just not caring, essentially. And yeah, he meets up with his brother. They talk about it too. They get drinks and stuff like that. The health company's moving out. Tamo keeps talking about the bird. So it seems like Pyoko still seems to keep visiting Tamo. Maybe in her dreams, maybe in real life. Who knows at this point? Another interesting, weird red flag. Watching TV, the family starts to see a black shadow show up on this program of this one particular TV station. Shadow doesn't rub off. They're thinking it's an issue with the TV, but they notice that it only appears on one channel. And then eventually it disappears. A little weird. And then during this time, Tamo pipes in and is all like, Pyoko was talking to me and told me about what this other place is like, and that there are people who are black shadows with no faces. And they live in a bad place, and the monsters, And of course, Teppei is all like, oh, sweet child, you're talking about, he tries to relate to his kid, of course thinking it's like a bad dream or something, about like him being afraid of like amoebas as a kid. And he thought that the hangers in his closet were monsters. And then they also have a dog called Cookie. And the dog gets distracted almost a little bit, hypnotized by the TV for a brief moment. Yeah, the animals are just, the animals acting up. I mean, come on here. Misao leaves Tamo and her child at Eiko's place for a little bit. And her and Eiko mentions how they were basically playing in the basement. And Misao, of course, has been very uncomfortable about the basement, understandably, because there's no fucking stairway. Why is the only entrance an elevator? Fair enough. And she hates that they're playing down there unsupervised. And that again, lockers look a little bit like coffins, so And her and Teppei, of course, had talked about, the basement, and no one can go and help you because what if this elevator's down? It's kind of a problem, right? Yeah, they basically have a conversation about that. And Teppei, of course, is like, well, anything bad can happen anywhere, And that thinking constantly like that all the time in real life, is not for the best, and, all that jazz, in denial, basically. It's another neighbor, too, Mitsue Tabata, and, she and her husband live in there as well. They don't got no kids. And they mentioned that, and she casually meets up with Eiko and Misao, and basically is all like, yo, all the homies are moving out of the apartment. There's, no more else moving in. It's now just down to 3 families. And Eiko's all like, well, it's probably because we're surrounded by an ancient graveyard. And that's where it gets into an interesting conversation, where they start to mention about the local area, and that apparently there were plans for an underground shopping district that was going to be connected.
Underground shopping district.
Yes, an underground shopping district that was going to connect to different train stations, which actually is a thing in Japan. I'm aware that there's these underground sections and stuff like that. And it was almost built, but the plans were stopped. And basically, it also further leads to a conversation about potentially, for some reason, alligators live in the area, but mainly in particular, a phantom road leading to nowhere existing as well underneath this ground. So Tamo, apparently, after playing in the basement, leaves something down there. Misao decides to go and get it. This is the first indication that some weird shit's happening in this basement, because she gets there. She hears a sound of rustling, and she feels a rust of cold, and she gets creeped out, and okay, oh look, there's the neighbor, okay, let's talk and leave, okay, boom, bye. And of course, Tatsuji and his wife Naomi decide to come visit, I guess, and then meanwhile, Teppei, I guess, decides to watch a taxi driver and a prostitute, I think it's a prostitute, maybe, fight. And the woman, the prostitute, is also part of the apartment unit. talks to him, and she's all like, yeah, I'm moving out, and like, y'all should move out too. And like, especially when she heard that Teppei had a child, she's like, listen, I'm getting a lot of bad vibes, but that basement be freaky though. Really, really freaky. Again, the basement is weird. Are we not getting that right now? The basement's fucking weird. The basement's really weird. And like, another note too, he gets home and him and Misao have a hard time opening up the sliding glass door in the back for a hot second. Could not open it up until Teppei was able to open it up. Weird that it couldn't open, but there was nothing blocking it. Okay, cool. All right, and then Tamo now starts to get bullied at school. Her and Kaori get bullied about them being graveyard apartment kids, being taunted about that. Misao, of course, trying to be a decent parent, trying to turn the situation to a positive tone, but Tamo's all like, nah, fuck that, I hate living here. As eloquently as a 6-year-old puts it. And Eiko and Misao, of course, have a conversation about that. And all that jazz. But in this conversation, Eiko's son, I think it's not Tatsuji, whatever the fuck his name is. He comes up and is all just like, yo, Tamo's bleeding out. And, and also that the elevator's broken. He's there's a problem there. And he's all like, Tamo got cut on the leg, but there wasn't anything sharp down there. Okay. How do you get a cut on your leg? Well, cutting it into something. Cool. Okay. So, and then all the adults go down there, and then there's this other guy who, is like the caretaker for the building, who's also about to leave too, shocker. He arrives and is calm about the elevator needing to be fixed. He says some sort of chanting stuff, and it actually makes the elevator work again. Okay, cool. Because I guess it wasn't a mechanical issue. But his chanting works and makes it work again. Okay, interesting. And basically, Tamo's bleeding out, super pale. He's taken to the hospital. But Cookie, though, getting down there, notably stares at a spot on the wall where Tamo was at, where she was sitting. And, intently stares at it. To the point, Cookie has to be dragged away. And yeah, and of course, after this whole incident, Teppei's reflecting back on the whole thing after Tamo is back home and recovering. Teppei's all just reflecting back on the conversation with the doctors about how they got the cut, and clear lack of understanding of knowing where the cut came from. And they think it was some whisper wind situation where, oh, the wind comes in and cuts the leg kind of by short, but the doctors aren't saying that, but that's what they kind of loosely suggest could have been what happened. Teppei decides to do some detective investigation work, of course, as any dad would, I guess. And, looks around. He finds absolutely nothing that could have caused this incident. He's all like, there's nothing sharp. The kids were playing each by themselves in the basement, essentially doing their own thing. No one threw anything at anyone. Yeah. And yeah, they're basically, Teppei and Misao are in their own ways just trying to rationalize anything that's happening right now. And Teppei, of course, runs into the guy who opened the elevator doing his chants, Shoji, and he's all like, this place be dangerous? And Shoji is leaving, and he's all like, yeah, you should bounce, bro. So that's the second person that's told Teppei to get the fuck out of there. And then we get some info into Shoji, and I guess he's a master of chi, and he was all like, yeah, basically it's a supernatural energy force around here, and I used my chi to basically force it open and redirect it back to me, and that caused him to be super exhausted and tired after doing all that to open up the elevator doors again. Apparently. So yeah, but yeah, Shoji's gone after this, so yeah. So Misao decides to go to the K-Ward offices after, talking with the ladies about, the underground shopping district plans. She decides to look further into that. And she looks into it, finds out the land was going to be used to make some high-rise city apartments. She finds a bunch of, advertising, pamphlets, all that jazz, paperwork. And, of course, some listed arguments against the development of this thing. And particularly, that's where we find out where the graveyards from the Taisho era, the bodies were buried, they weren't cremated, and then eventually the plan stopped, right? And she also finds another man, asks him more about the proposal and the movement of bodies, and the man states it basically fizzled out, but the developers were able to dig a hole at the graveyard. They were able to dig some shit, but it didn't get any further than that. And apparently Misao's mom decides to show up, come visit the family, and basically they're pissed about the fact she had an affair. Well, she didn't have an affair, but she decided to marry a dude who had an affair on his first wife and all that jazz. And yeah, and apparently her dad hasn't really been talking to her ever since too. So that's cool. So the family hates them for being married now too. Yeah, Eiko comes by. She's all like, she felt she was hearing voices on the other side of the wall in the basement, basically. And that's when Miso kind of puts 2 and 2 together, being like, yo, what this building's at the very same site they dug this fucking hole in this graver. And I'm like, you don't say, Misao. You don't say. No shit. And Eiko's all like, I wonder if someone died or was killed down here. And it's like, well, no shit, maybe, who knows. And yeah, and then we hear some more, again, red flags coming up, like, okay, Teppei and Tamo run into the neighbors, Mitsue, I think the single, the couples with no kids, basically being like, I was hearing scratches, loud noises, and clashes at night coming from the basement, basically. And then, of course, Teppei's now getting kind of annoyed and yells at Misao when she's talking about the whole thing with Eiko that they were talking about and what Eiko heard in the basement. And Teppei is basically in denial about it and being a dick about it, but of course, it seems typical. Basically. And however, the neighbors decide to ask Teppei to go down to the basement to scope out the basement to see what could have caused little Tamo from getting injured. Misao is obviously not happy about this, but and frankly just wants to go ahead and start putting the apartment on the market. And Teppei, is not happy about that, being like, we just bought the place. And, is all like, and goes on a whole rant, and like being a rant about this and why should he worry about the dead and all that jazz. And then Misao's like, bitch, the fuck? You don't respect the dead? Hello, your first wife, dude? Remember that? Remember all that? Yeah, okay. So Teppei's kind of a dickhead, I guess. But yeah, basically Teppei and then the neighbors, aka the older neighbor couple, go down there. They basically find nothing. But they're heading towards the elevator. But the elevator appears to be stuck. He starts feeling the draft, the lights go in and out. They're all fucking panicking. They'll be like, okay, we need to find a call box to get the hell out of here. But yeah, that ain't working. And Teppei's really starting to feel like the wind is circling his legs and like literally holding on to him. And he's finding it hard to breathe. And that's when the neighbors, of course, directly tell Teppei about the whole shopping mall district that, and all the details of that. And then it also sounds like they're hearing a lot more noises and an entity basically starts to make their way towards them. And something at some point hits him on the back of the head and he is knocked out. And Misao and Tamo knows the TV is not working properly. And then Misao realizes, oh shit, the neighbors aren't back and the elevator's stuck at B2. So she's all like, shit. And she calls up Eiko and they are like hurrying up. Eiko and her husband hurry up and they're like trying to fix this goddamn elevator. And then the TV starts working again. They're able to get to the basement. They find everyone. But now there is a large black stain on the back wall of the basement. Interesting. Something here that wasn't there before, right? Yes. Questionable. Lovely. They go ahead, check the elevator. No issues. And they're like, yeah, but they also decide because of this incident that they're going to have all the doors to the apartment building unlocked, permanently unlocked, and have the emergency locking stuff removed. Basically. But Eiko and her family are peacing out because, Misao goes to say goodbye and stuff like that. However, as the family's leaving, the main doors to the apartment are literally sealed shut tight. And they can't open them. And all of a sudden, these white fingerprints start appearing on the glass. And of course, the people are freaking out, being like, what the actual fuck? And then it stops. And Eiko and her family, essentially fucking rush outside and are like, bitch, we are getting the fuck out. And of course she, Cookie rushes after them. And she's like freaking out, going berserk because she clearly sees something. But yeah. Yeah, Teppei, of course, now is starting to have more nightmares about Reiko. Not ex-wife, but his first wife that killed herself. So, wasn't really an ex, but, And Teppei finally now believes everything that Misao's been telling him. And is all like, all right, we're gonna go find a new place now. And it's like, thank you for catching up. Thank you for catching up. Thank you for finally catching up on that. Thank you for getting there eventually. His brother and his wife decide to show up at the apartment, and Tamo spills the fact to them that they're looking to move. And of course, Naomi, being apparently a bitch and all, decides to try to get nosy and, figure out the details of the situation. And Misao and Teppei basically come up with, you know, half-baked reasons as to why they're moving again and all that jazz. And yeah, they're still having issues, and then from time to time they still have issues with the elevator not working, but then it works again. Teppei and Misao have this whole thing where they're going to in a real estate apartment. They look at 2 apartments. They choose one that looks like it's going to be nice in a separate, almost individual unit itself that's like its own building. But then the realtor decides to call him back and basically be like, yeah, that building burnt down. And we have no idea what the fuck did that. Because the gas, because the electrical and the gas were already cut off prior. So nothing should have burnt that shit down. So then they decided to be like, okay, we'll go with the other smaller apartment we looked at then. Cool. And then this is also the time the other people left in the building are the old, Mitsue and her husband, that old couple. And they decided to leave the building. They basically got new jobs as resident managers at a seaport, like, apartment complex building. So cool, they're gonna be by the ocean. And yeah, they have a final conversation with Misao. And apparently the people, Misao and her family were supposed to move, but this is where we find out that the person of that tiny apartment, whoever lived there prior or was living there prior, had died the night before. And this was interesting because it was like the woman that was living at that old tiny apartment that Misao and Teppei were looking at was only like in her early 20s, 23, 24, and it didn't appear like it was suicide. So, mysterious death. Weird. But not suicide. Weird. But yeah. And apparently, pulling away from the building, the old couple noticed that it lit up brightly as they were pulling away. And then the taxi driver starts asking them some very interesting questions. Like if they had kids or grandkids, and Mitsue was all like, yeah, no, we don't. Weren't able to. And then the taxi driver was all like, then who the heck was seeing you off then? And he was all like, yeah, there were like 10 to 8 people in front of the temple over there watching you guys leave. And then the couple were like, there were people there? We didn't see anyone. But the taxi guy was all like, yeah, they looked pretty gloomy and dressed in black. Okay. Weird, but okay. And yeah, so then eventually we're down to just Misao, Teppei, and Tamo. And of course, Cookie. And the family do end up finding a 2-story building to move into finally. At least for, a few years at least. And it turns out Pyoko still has been visiting Tamo from time to time and recently told her to basically move out as soon as possible. Whatever you can do. And Tatsuji and Naomi arrive for basically the family's final night at the apartment. They're staying over to help them move and stuff. And Naomi now all of a sudden starts to think it's all weird and creepy being the only ones left at this apartment. But of course Misao pretends everything's fine. And basically Misao, in an interesting note, picks up Reiko's death tablet, feels it kind of move around. Feels like the cloth that was covering the death tablet, the memorial tablet, was moved or taken off or something, but no one touched it. Weird. Yep. They also notice with Naomi and Tatsuji that the TV's not working. And then as they wake up the next day, they start to notice that the doors and the windows of the apartment are not opening. The front door to the apartment opens still, the door to the individual unit, but everything else is not opening. The phone is also dead too. And Teppei decides to go check out the main floor, and then guess what? They go to the main door of the building, and guess what? There are white fingerprints all over that motherfucker. Great. We got a problem, Houston. Right? So they're trying to break open this door, and yeah, not working, because it's basically anything that's hitting it's bouncing off like rubber, even though the door is made of glass. Great. Fantastic. We got a problem. Tatsuji hurts himself in the process, and Teppei basically goes ape shit on the door, and yeah, nothing. And if anything, more fingerprints show up on the door. So great. Just bright white, covered in full white fingerprints. The movers appear to arrive, but then something kind of goes a little bit out of the way. The family's watching this. They didn't hear the truck go away, and they rush to the roof. The truck isn't there. There are no clouds, and no other soul, it seems to be, around the area besides the individual family. It looks for the most part mostly normal. And then from the roof, they see 2 steaming dark blobs. And it's kind of almost giving off, as literally described in the book, as a Salvador Dali painting vibe. Literally. And one blob becomes the Japanese kanji for large, and then the other one, and they also see the kaki scraps of what was presumably the drivers being absorbed. And they deduced that, the movie men are dead now. Great. So then the brothers decide to write a large sign, that's basically an SOS sign. Teppei and Tatsuji argue basically over Teppei's knowledge about this whole building and the fuckery and all the creepy shit going on. And then they also get into an argument about Raiko and her death, Teppei's first wife. And basically, Tatsuji being all like, I had to clean up all your shit from that mess. And basically go to the family, say that we're sorry she died, and all this other crap. And then he basically convinces Teppei to tell him everything, which he does tell him everything. And then, you know, yay, at least someone's all caught up. The phone company dude shows up. And the brothers are shouting at him to call the police and stuff. And then the phone company dude waits till the electrician gets here. And he gives them the notice that they get from the brothers. Those two individuals get into the cars and they explode. Almost like it's a sign from the spiritual universe, basically. Like a spiritual explosion. They're just exploding. And then Teppei and Tatsuji are all just like, yeah, we're fucked. And they're leaving the roof, basically. The power in the building goes out. There's still some food in the fridge, but, you know, it's gonna get back real quick. And then trying to make some food. The building's getting hot because, again, no electricity, no AC and shit. They try to open the doors. Of course, nothing's working still. Yeah, and then they're all just like, oh, wait, that health company, they still left shit here. We can get food from there. They still, because the health company was promoting these, those bars that you eat that basically make you more fat to add calories to your body. Calorie dense. You know what I'm talking about, Sammy? Those, like, yeah, those kind of bars. Like, yeah. And so, like, they go down to they're like, okay, it's probably worth it just to go to the basement to get some fucking food so we can try to live, you know? And they decided to go down there the next day and sleep it off. Door is covered in more thumbprints somehow. I don't know how many more thumbprints you could fucking get on that door, but it's there. They find the bars, but they also find that black hole in the wall where Tama was injured and where Cookie was basically staring at that one time when Tama got injured. It's gotten bigger, and it's, like, more of a hole. And then Tatsuji's all like, I'm hearing shit from the hole. And hearing all the voices. And then, of course, they start, like, trying to break at the hole in the wall. That's at the back of this place. They apparently managed to make a hole big enough to stick your whole ass head through, so that's what Tatsuji does. And, he's all like, oh my god, bro, there's an actual road in here. Like, legit, a road in the ground. So, looks like we found our Phantom Road, ladies and gentlemen. There's our Phantom Road. And Tatsuji's all, like, going chaotic. Well, he's all like, oh my god, we're gonna be saved, we're gonna live. Teppei's totally convinced, doubting that shit. And that it's pretty much otherworldly at this point. But, you know, all of them eventually ventured down there. And just moved on. Go ahead and, not fully moved on, but they went to go ahead and go through this, keep cracking at this hole in the wall and keep walking, see what we got here. Of course, Cookie freaks out going down there and, you know, they see the road. Naomi and Tatsuji are freaking out, but, like, they're, like, freaking out in, like, the, oh my god, we're gonna be saved way. Tamo's scared, obviously, because she's a child. You know, they're all going down the road. Cookie at some point freaks the fuck out. Naomi and Tatsuji are in front of them and somehow disappear. Just, whoop, vanish. And then the earth begins to move underneath them. Teppei's trying to get his brother, but no voice is heard. And the area becomes, like, you know, gross and scary. They're hearing a lot of voices. Oh my god, it's freaking the fuck out. And the remaining four of them basically head back to the elevator and get the fuck out of the basement. And the book ends, basically. They're still there. They just decide to kind of, at this point, spend the rest of the time being happy and shit. You know, Teppei and Misao recollect their thoughts, probably are gonna bang. I don't know. But then it ends with the elevator unexpectedly starting to work, and then it opens up at their floor, and then some mysterious voices are heard, and figurines are stepping out, and then Cookie becomes alert, and then the story ends. Boom. So they probably die, is what I'm getting at. They probably die. Probably dead. Probably. Pretty straightforward horror story, though. But just basically, I feel like this should be just also known as Red Flags, the novel, because, oh my god, the red flags in this book are so many red flags of, like, yeah, get the fuck out of there. But at the end, it does seem like the universe, or the spiritual world, really wants that family to be there. Yet somehow Raiko doesn't appear as a ghost, and I'm just like, oh, we could have had Raiko show up as a ghost, being like, I'm gonna fuck you all up, but no, we can't have that again. I was waiting for that to happen, but who knows, maybe the other spirits vibed and saw that's what happened, or like, we're gonna take revenge out on them for you, sis. So that's that book. Not as twisty and turny, I feel like, as any other horror book, but like, yeah, there's suspense and just a lot of, why did you choose to move here in the first place? And just why didn't you leave sooner? Kind of scenarios, you know? But yeah. Woohoo. Woohoo.
Ew.
All right, Kayla.
Sort of where the starting point is you're in the perspective of Sowon. Sowon is the son of this character named Hyunsu, who is the man who was convicted of both murdering this like young girl and like throwing her in a dam, but also flooding an entire village worth of people and killing like essentially just obliterating an entire village.
Not that murder is not bad.
Yes.
But also, I feel like obliterating an entire village.
An entire village of people.
Maybe worse?
Worse. It's definitely worse.
One of those is murder. One of those might be terrorism.
It's giving It's giving
maybe terrorism.
It's a lot of murder.
You know?
It could be terrorism, depending on the context.
Yes.
You can go with terrorism.
He's on death row in South Korea for that because
you
clearly, when you kill an entire village of people,
maybe one murder.
That's what'll do it.
But many a murder? Maybe many a murder. Yes.
It's essentially what happened is that there's also a lot of specifics about like dams and like reservoirs and how the specifics of that work, and I don't specifically know that, but essentially what seems to have happened is that there's a giant lake type reservoir that will fill up or be however much depending on how they want to control the water flow for it, and that can be opened on like one edge, but if you open it all at once, it just floods the city that is beneath the dam, and so that's essentially what he's charged of doing, is opening the floodgates of that, and then it just took out the entire city within a matter of minutes. Like, there was no chance to fix it because as soon as he did it, like, it was too late. So that's what's happening there. We're then with Sowon. Sowon has been moved from family member to family member over the years because no matter where he goes, his sort of dark past of being the son of, like, a murderer is following him with him, where he gets, like, some of the schools he attends, like, straight up refuse to have him as a student there. Like, it's, like,
I feel like if you are the innocent child of a murderer, you should be able to go by, like, mom's maiden name or some shit.
So that's the thing, is that he transfers everywhere and is, like, changing names, but it's still following him around. Because someone, it feels like if, like, no matter where he is,
targeted situation.
It's, like, it's targeted, where it's, like, flyers will show up, like, our magazine articles will show up, and, like, literally in the classrooms, like, it's very targeted, that someone is following him and making sure that his past is known to the people around him. So he ends up then living with this man named Sung-hwan, who lived with his family back when they lived in this city where the dam was. One day he is essentially alone, but then he finds this entire manuscript that Sung-hwan has started writing that is detailing all of the events that happened with his father and him and this other man 7 years ago. So then it starts with the flashback sort of situation where we essentially are made aware of how this girl is killed, like, immediately. It's in the first, like, couple chapters of this book. Sowon and his dad are this new family. They got a new job at, essentially being his dad got a job as a security guard working for this reservoir, and there's a lot of, like, also family drama going on with him. His dad is, like, a raging alcoholic, and his mom also is in, like, they're like, his parents are, like, not in love at all, and his mom, like, low-key hates his dad, and there's a lot of, like, financial bad, like, situations going on with their family that's also adding a lot of stress. Sung-hwan lived in the house that they were supposed to be moving into, and I don't know why specifically this had to happen, where they couldn't kick him out of the house, but also had to give the house to the family. So they just moved into that house with him. And so Sowon ends up just sharing a bedroom with him, and they just live together in this house with this random man who apparently they are not allowed to kick out of it before they move in. But he also works in the same, like, job as, like, a security guard at this reservoir place. So the night before this, his family's supposed to move up there, his mom sent his dad to go just check out the house and see what's going on. His dad then got drunk instead at the rest stop by the city and then hits this girl with his car.
Fantastic.
Oh!
And then dumps her body into the reservoir.
What is with people dumping children's bodies into bodies of water?
You know, it's a choice.
It's a theme today.
It's a theme today. Where this gets complicated is that, so the reason this girl was just, like, randomly on the street, in the middle of the night, was because her dad's name is Young Jae, he is very abusive, very controlling. Her mom, left her there, essentially, has been for years trying to divorce him, and essentially he will not let her divorce him because he will incessantly follow her and track her down and, like, force her, and it's really fucked up. And he does, like, a lot of the same shit to his daughter, where, she very clearly misses her mom, but he's, like, also, like, very, just, like, physically abusive. So she is essentially ran away in the middle of the night because she has this little cat friend that she's been feeding, his little stray cat. But the cat, fucked up, like, one of her dad's, like, he makes these, like, little model castle things out of twigs. And the cat, like, got down there somehow and, like, fucked it up. And so he didn't murder the cat. I think he, like, severely, like, beat the cat. And so that really upset her, and so she ran away in the middle of the night, and that's how she ended up on the road and then got hit by a car. And the other thing that makes it, like, confusing and complicated is that Sungkwan, for some reason, has, like, a side hobby. As well, he's both a writer and he also is a diver. So he is learned about how there is, like, a sunken underground city in the dam reservoir. And it's, like, he's clearly not going to get permission to just go scuba diving there, so he sneaks in there in the middle of the night. So he's scuba diving in the dam, just taking photos of this city when the girl's body gets dumped into the lake. So
Can
all
you
three of them...
scuba dive in a dam?
Yeah,
that feels like an absolute waste of your time.
I don't know why he's doing it. It's just, it's a choice,
just being
really.
Done. Yes,
it's a choice.
I'm just saying that scuba diving in a dam seems like a waste of time.
Yes.
I don't know.
He's there to take pictures because there is a sunken city in this dam reservoir.
Fantastic.
That's why why
interest
him. So it's like, sure, I guess. Again, he
the
wants it as inspiration.
Atlantis,
Lost City of the Dam, I guess, you know. We get a very, like, chronological line of events of what happens after that. Hyunsu, who is Sowon's alcoholic dad, who is the actual murderer in this case, is just, like, having a mental breakdown slowly, where he keeps seeing visions of her, and he also keeps seeing visions of his dead abusive father, and also just starts losing feeling in his left arm or his right arm because he was a pitcher at some point in time, but then got into a car accident and got an injury which, like, sort of forced him out of baseball. And ever since then, he's had an issue where his arm will go numb for no reason. And that starts happening at, like, an increasingly concerning pace. And the only way for him to regain feeling his arm is to literally, like, cut himself and feel pain of, like, severe pain of some sort. So that's just a bad situation. And the alcoholism is worse. And while all of that is happening, both Sungkwan and Young Jae, I think both are pretty sure that he is the one who killed the girl. Young Jae is definitely sure because he's an obsessive kind of psychopath man. And he is going through all of these details. He's looking extensively into this family's history and where he was on that night and all sorts of... He's looking into both of them, both Sungkwan and Young Jae, because he also figures out that Sungkwan probably was in the dam for some reason, but he doesn't know specifically why he's there or what he was doing there. And so once he figures out that he's pretty sure that Hyunsu murdered his daughter, he starts to, like, set up this incredibly elaborate revenge plan against him, where in the past it involves him... He throws some type of, like, a weird, like, educational event with, like, some children from an orphanage, and that's supposed to be, like, a big publicity thing, but then it turns out he only did that so he could get access to the control room of this dam, so he could go in there at a later point in time. He then kidnaps Hyunsu's son So-won. He kidnaps him, and then he also kidnaps Sung-hwan, and he also kidnaps Hyunsu's wife and So-won's mother, and has them all tied up in various locations. Actually, I think he sends goons after Sung-hwan, but he is just kind of left in a room and they don't bother him as much. They take So-won. He ties him up with this cat that also his daughter really liked. And So-won actually, there's a whole storyline about him befriending this cat. And he is also weirdly seeing visions of the dead girl, even though he never met the dead girl. But he has moved to this town and, like, had just heard of her and is hearing all these rumors about how she had no friends and was, like, very lonely. So he also sees, like, weird visions of the dead girl. But he, so Youngjae takes So-won, ties him up on a tree in, like, this little island in the middle of, like, the big dam reservoir, and essentially starts raising the water level in the dam area. And while he's doing that, he's essentially forcing Hyunsu, his father, to watch, and is like, do you want to save your son and empty the floodgates of the dam and kill an entire village of people, or do you want your son to die? There is a very long storyline about how Hyunsu does care very much so about his son, like that his like son means like the world to him, even though he is like incredibly mentally unstable and not that great of a father. He would essentially do anything for his son. So that's when he does indeed open the floodgates of the dam in order to save his son. While that's happening, he's got their mom tied up in a different area. And the mom, I think, is actually she's able to free herself and fight back a little bit, except for I'm pretty sure she does end up succumbing to injuries and she dies at that point in time, the mom. We find out that Youngjae is also suspected to be dead at having been killed in this entire flood event, although his body was never recovered. So he's kind of like mysteriously in the void for a while.
In the void.
And so it's like, yeah, if you can't find a body, that's pretty suspicious. So
in a fiction story, that always means they're alive.
Yep. That always means they're
alive.
alive.
Floodwater.
Exactly.
They're alive and in the water at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Sung-hwan he ends up escaping the goons who took him, and then takes a boat out into the dam and saves So-won and the cat from the middle of the dam island. And this is why like the dam situation is very confusing to me, because they're seemingly like, it's seemingly not fully man-made, and it's just like this structure was like constructed around a city that had like a little hill on the top, and how much of this little hill and the island you can see is it's like how the people turn out, like, oh, how much of like rainfall we've had and stuff for like, it's like weather predicting stuff or whatever. But I just haven't fully wrapped my head around how that entire situation works, and it's a very central plot of this book. And so after that all happens, Hyunsu gets convicted of both the murder of the girl and also the obliteration of this town pretty fast, gets sent to prison and is on death row. And then now if we skip back to the present, 7 years later, where So-won is reading this entire book of stuff that Sung-hwan has left for him, he all of a sudden gets knocked out by some goons and gets kidnapped. And then he wakes up. We realize that this is the day, I think it's the day of or the day after his father has just gotten killed on death row. So his dad is dead officially at this point. Then he wakes up in a lighthouse. They've taken both him and Sung-hwan. And then here comes Youngjae, because of course he wasn't dead. And he was like, I have literally been plotting out my revenge for 7 years from now, because I wanted your dad to go to prison, and I also want to kill all of you, but I wanted you to have to know that your dad was dead first. And so he was like sabotaging his life for 7 years, following him around, essentially forcing him out of all of his extended family's houses and schools for 7 years. Because he's a little psychopath like that. And then he's brought the two of them to this lighthouse, and he's like, and now it's finally time for me to finish all my long 7-year plan for revenge, and I'm just gonna kill both of you now.
Revenge!
And I'm pretty sure he was gonna put them both in a coffin and like tie like chains and rocks to it and just like dump them in the ocean type of situation.
At least he's got flair.
Right, but he had to have like a whole villain monologue first, because he's a little bit psychopathic.
Yeah, and I love when people do villain monologues. Of course, no one has the thought of just kick him in the nuts and run.
Right, like, because he had to knock them both out first, wait for them to wake up, then give the villain monologue,
then do the villain monologue,
and then he was gonna murder them. Yes.
Also, if they're about to die, why do they need to know your plan?
They don't. They don't. But you know, it's a little bit of the narcissism of it all, I guess. And so what ends up happening here is that Seung-hwan, while writing this book, has been trying to contact Youngjae's wife, who is essentially fled to Paris and is living in Paris, and is just like living away from him because she's like, I'm hoping to God he doesn't find me here. Except for the fact that when she starts corresponding with Youngjae, because she very much would like to see her husband arrested, and also doesn't want, like, she does, like, kind of want the whole story of this event to be known, because while, yes, his dad did open the floodgates, there's a lot of other situations happening around that. It's kind of forced upon him. When she's corresponding with him, he finds out where she's at, so he shows up in Paris one day and is, like, threatening his wife again, doing all sorts of nonsense with that. But she ends up giving, her phone number to Seung-hwan, and then So-won ends up with it. And so while he's giving his big villain monologue, she's like, oh, I've been speaking to your wife and she's running away from you. And he's trying to pull some type of a card of like, anything really to distract him from not killing them in some amount of time. So he calls up the wife, and the wife is taunting him with all sorts of, I don't know, like just kind of useless things. And then eventually, the police arrive. Because Seung-hwan he kind of knew that this was gonna happen. He was like, this man is a psychopath. He's definitely plotting something for the day that this kid's dad is going to get executed. Like, he is like, and he was like, it's so suspicious that we've been followed around all of these years by somebody. And he was on to the fact that he was pretty sure he was alive and it was him who was doing it. So once, So-won got the letter of, like, from the prison saying, oh, your dad's execution has been carried out today, he went to the police, and the police have also kind of been reinvestigating this and been thinking it's a little bit suspicious, everything that was going on there, and they were able to sort of track down that he was not fully dead because he has other properties and all sorts of other bank accounts and shit like that he's been living as, like, kind of a ghost for the last 7 years.
A ghost.
So he ends up, Seung-hwan gets with the police, essentially puts a tracker on his phone so they know where he is, and then they found out that the tracker hasn't moved in like 2 hours, and maybe they're stuck in this lighthouse, and he has them tied up in a lighthouse, and so eventually the police bust in, and they get it. And also I think that's why they called the wife. They called the wife to get a confession of murder out of him. That's what it was. I was like, there's something more about that. So yeah, they got a recorded confession about all of the past events of the 7 years, as well as him planning to murder the two of them, like, right now. And then that's sort of the end of it. And then the book sort of just closes with him picking up his dad's body and giving him, like, a actual funeral and send-off. And, like, he's got a clearly complicated relationship with it, but it's sort of coming to terms with, like, everything that has happened, and then kind of putting behind him the sort of, like, ghost of an event that has been following him for, like, his entire life. So that's essentially all of it. It was very good. I think it would make a great K-drama or, like, a movie or something.
It does scream K-drama energy.
Like, I can see it. Like, if they want to put this as, like, I don't think it can be a full, like, crime thriller, but it can be, like, one of those, like, more periodic ones where they have, like, other things happening in between it.
Yeah.
And this is, like, the sort of season-long, like, plot line of it or something. I think it would be really good.
Yeah, I agree. I think it could sound like that.
What a time all of these were.
Books.
That's been books.
Books.
All the books.
Oh, we can really tell we're more into the one genre than the other genre.
Yeah, it's like I said, I don't read often. Most of the reading I've done in the past years has been literally for this podcast. But
most things I've done generally have been for this podcast.
True.
Most media I consume is for this podcast.
But with that being said, occasionally when I do read books, I do read this genre of books. Yes. So
Yeah, for me, I don't go into horror or thriller as much, but it's nice to try to push yourself out of your comfort area once in a while, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, this is one of those times, I'd say.
So, yeah, so these are...
this is support Asian American authors.
Woo,
yes.
We did it.
There are good ones out there.
There are many good ones out there.
There are many good ones out there. It's just, like, just because we're shitting on certain... It's mostly the K-pop elements of those other books that we're really shitting on, so...
Yeah, the problem was never the writing.
No. Nope. So that's been our duology of Asian book club.
Basically.
Yay.
Yeah.
This will not be a series.
This will not be a series. We might read more books in the future, but if I'm being honest, it might be because they're bad.
It could be.
Good chance could be because they're bad.
Probably. Pretty good chance.
Very good chance.
Very good chance. But we are available on all major podcasting platforms like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. We also have a YouTube channel. We post all of our episodes there, along with fun clip videos occasionally as well. And with that, we will see you guys in the next episodes. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.